We wrote Humanocracy because we believe as societies, as individuals, we can no longer afford organizations that waste more human capacity than they use. Given the challenges we face as a species, we cannot afford organizations where only 15% of employees are truly engaged in their work. We cannot afford organizations where an enormous amount of effort goes into fighting bureaucratic battles. We cannot afford organizations where less than 30% of the people are really called on to bring their initiative and their originality to work. So our goal is to move from an old bureaucratic model that focused on maximizing compliance to one that is focused on maximizing contribution. And to make that switch, we are going to have to challenge the very fundamentals of how we think about our organizations. Do we need so many managers? Do we need so many layers? Do we need all the rules and processes? Our answer is no, but to create that future, we're going to have to unlearn most everything we've learned over the last 150 years about how you organize people at work.
As Gary mentioned, the organizations that we profile in the book were built with one goal in mind, and that's to maximize human contribution. And we coined the term humanocracy to highlight this radically different paradigm of organization. And the difference lies in how the role of the individual is defined in relationship to the institution. In a bureaucracy, it's the people who are the instruments. They are the resources that are employed by the organization to create products and services. In a humanocracy, instead, the relationship is flipped. It's the organization that is the instrument. It's the vehicle that people use to better their lives and the lives of those they serve. And it's through this kind of shift in perspective that we can begin to imagine and build organizations that are incredibly passionate, truly creative, and highly adaptable. In other words, the kind of organizations that have the necessary capabilities to thrive in the 21st century. So the most surprising thing about writing the book for me was all the evidence showing that bureaucracy has been growing steadily over the past few decades. And let me just give you a data point. Since 1983, the number of managers and administrators in the US workforce has more than doubled, while employment in all other occupations has only gone up by 40%. And this wasn't supposed to happen. Back in 1988, late management guru Peter Drucker predicted that by 2008, so 20 years later, organizations would operate with half the levels and no more than a third of the managers. And his prediction made sense because it rested on the fact that work was becoming more knowledge-based, therefore harder to script, and that technology would allow people to coordinate without managerial intermediation, if you will. Now, Drucker was right about a lot of things, but obviously not about this particular thing. And it just shows to me that bureaucracy is incredibly persistent and deeply entrenched, and that as an organizational model, it will take a systematic effort to dislodge it, which we then try to outline in the book.
I think the most startling finding for me through our research came from a survey we ran with the Harvard Business Review, where we surveyed 10,000 managers and leaders around the world. 76% of those individuals who worked in large organizations said that bureaucratic behaviors were decisive in who gets ahead. Not one factor among many, but the most important factor. And what that suggested to us is that bureaucracy has become a massive multiplayer game that's played for the stakes of positional power. And it encourages a certain set of behaviors: hoarding resources, elbowing rivals aside, managing up, negotiating targets, deflecting blame. And that those behaviors consume an enormous amount of emotional and intellectual energy in organizations and yet contribute almost nothing to the achievement of purpose. We've long been told by management experts and pundits that large organizations cannot be entrepreneurial. And yet, in virtually all of the organizations we profile in the book, people on the front lines have the autonomy, the upside, the business literacy to think and act like entrepreneurs. And they flourish. They create far more value than their competitors, have higher return on capital, much higher engagement scores. And when you see this, you understand that we can turn every employee in the world into an entrepreneur, with all the positive impact that will have on productivity growth, on a more equitable distribution of the rewards of capitalism.
This is really about what we learned from people on the front lines, and it was truly moving, not just surprising. We met employees who design their own large and complicated equipment, who contract out with suppliers, who talk to the customer directly, and who are just incredibly entrepreneurial. They basically start their own business and manage it. They get to make significant business decisions. They harness their expertise, their imagination, and their relationship with their colleagues. It just brought home to me and to Gary the amazing level of talent that is simply wasted in most large organizations where people don't have these opportunities. And all this energy, this creativity, comes from people and occupations that would be typically described as low skill. But our experience suggests that the term low skill, especially when it comes to specific occupations, says very little about people who are in those jobs and a lot more about our prejudice. That is, that we need to slot commodity people in commodity jobs.
In traditional organizations and large organizations, your power and influence correlates with your position, with positional authority. And what you have, in effect, is an aristocracy of administrators. We believe that what we need in organizations are multiple hierarchies where your influence and your compensation reflects your peer-attested competence and your genuine value added, and that all of the energy of human beings should go into creating more value and not those zero-sum battles for promotion. We describe that as a meritocracy. We are very well aware that many people in the world don't have the opportunity to build their skills, to build their talents, and that some people are given a lot greater opportunity to build the things that allow them to thrive in organizations. And we see that we can change this. We can go to people on the front lines at every level. We can give them the business skills. We can give them the opportunity to experiment, to innovate, and to grow their capabilities that allow them to therefore grow their contribution and claim a greater share of the total rewards. That's what we mean by meritocracy.
The irony is that bureaucracy was supposed to excise all the flaws of traditional organizations. You know, the nepotism, the politics, and so on. But many of these shortcomings haven't gone away. Many of them have merely shifted to the informal side. To create a truly meritocratic organization, we must do 4 things. First, we must decontaminate judgments about merit. Second, we must better align wisdom with authority. Third, we need to correlate compensation with contribution as opposed to position on the hierarchy. And fourth, as Gary mentioned, build naturally dynamic hierarchies where power and influence are the product of your peer-attested impact and not your particular role. We would suggest 2. First, start with yourself. You know, bureaucracy kind of makes jerks of us all, right? And sometimes we just get inured to the biases and the elitism that comes from a top-down management style. And so ask yourself, in what way am I behaving more like a bureaucrat and not so much like a leader who catalyzes the initiative and the imagination of colleagues? The second thing is to invite the whole organization on this journey with you. Busting bureaucracy is a complex task, and no one person will have all the answers on how to do that. We think that the journey to humanocracy should be open to everyone who's willing to shape the organization's future in a way that elicits the best thinking and generates deep commitment.
You reach a point in any field of human endeavor where you cannot solve the new problems with old principles. And I think that's where we are with business and management. We inherited a set of principles that were right for the industrial age, the principles of standardization, specialization, routinization, and formalization. They're good if you're trying to solve the problem of compliance. But if you want to build an organization that has an evolutionary advantage that can change as fast as the world around it, that has an innovation advantage and inspiration advantage, you have to start with new principles. And in the book, we talk about these principles like ownership, meritocracy, markets, openness, and so on. And the goal is to embed those principles in the processes and practices of how we run our organizations every day. It's not one Armageddon-like battle. It's going to be a series of experiments, but guided by a consistent set of principles that we know are the principles that allow you to build an organization that is as capable as the people inside.